Wheels of Providence. And if you have your Bible, you can go ahead and turn to Ezekiel chapter 1. But while you're turning there, I felt led to, on the way in, to start with this. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4, we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. In the Message, it says, in the same passage, if you look at us, you might well miss the brightness. We carry this precious message around in unadorned clay pots of our ordinary lives. That's to prevent anyone from confusing God's incomparable power with us. As it is, there's not much chance of that. You know for yourselves that we're not much to look at. We've been surrounded and battered by troubles, but we're not demoralized. We're not sure what to do, but we know what God knows what to do. We know that God knows what to do. We've been spiritually terrorized, but God hasn't left our side. We've been thrown down, but we haven't been broken. What they did to Jesus, they do to us. Trial and torture, mockery and murder. What Jesus did among them, he does in us. He lives, which makes Jesus' life all the more evident in us. While we're going through the worst, you're getting in on the best. That's Eugene Peterson's spin on that. While we're going through the worst, you're getting the best. When we are persecuted, when we are struck down, we're not destroyed. Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. But when desire comes, it is a tree of life. Hope deferred, you know what deferred means? It means prolonged, delayed, or drawn out. It means prolonged, delayed, or drawn out. How many can testify that something in your life you thought should have happened a lot sooner is not happening, or didn't happen? Or maybe you should have got drawn out of some temptation you was in, or some storm you were in. You knew God was going to deliver you out of it, but it just didn't happen in your timing, right? It was a little bit slower than you would have liked. But there's something about the slowness. There's something about the silence. There's something about the darkness. Not to go ahead and drop you in on this, but what is the quote you said last night? God works in the darkness.
I would rather work with God in the dark than go alone in the light. That's by Mary Gardner Brainerd.
I would rather go alone in the dark with God in the dark.
Rather be with God in the dark than be alone in the light.
Than be alone in the light.
And I think that speaks to, sometimes you meet these individuals and they're not, and I'm not saying this to reveal any prejudice or bias, but you have church-going folk and then you have people that don't go to church. They're non-church going folk. They don't attend church on Sunday. They don't watch a stream. They don't catch their Sunday morning service anywhere. But they're good people. But they're lost. And we know they're lost. But because they're good people, what do they feel lost in? They're not caught in some 7 deadly sin. They're not engaged in something that, they could attend any church and probably be considered pretty good. You walk in the door and you're kind of okay already. We don't really know what to preach to you. You're not a thief. You're not a liar. You're not an adulterer. You don't hate or want to kill anyone. You honor your mother and father. What do we do with it? Well, you reveal to them that there's even more that they have to offer. If they're getting all of this right already, imagine what they could be doing with that. And that's what you begin to build in value. So I would rather go with God in the dark places of my being. Because when I show up, I'm not that guy. I've got vices. I've got battles. I've got struggles. I've got names that you could call me, and you'd be justified in calling me those names. Those are things that I do, or I struggle with, or I still battle with, or still feel tempted to engage in. Oh, but if God is with me there, then I'm in a much better place than the person who doesn't fight those battles, that is living their life every day without the presence of God, without the understanding of who they really are, because that person doesn't even know what they ought to be doing. See, that there's two types of folks. There's those that don't even know what they ought to be doing, and there's those that know what they ought to be doing and they're not doing it, or they're doing something else. It's arguable to say that if you're trying to figure out how to do it and God is with you, you're in a better situation than the person that's without God that doesn't even know what they ought to be doing. That's truly lost. You can give them all the maps in the world, but they can't tell you where they are. So the map does them no good. It does them no use. That's why we need God with us. That's why if I make my bed in heaven, behold, thou art there. But if I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. It doesn't matter where I am. It doesn't matter on which side of the spectrum or which extreme, whether I'm the chief among sinners or whether I've followed the rules my whole life. We know that there are people with temperaments that are very agreeable in nature. And that agreeableness tends towards a rule-following person, an individual, where breaking a law, going over the speed limit, all of these things become no-nos. It's no, 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 no. No, 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 no. Well, what did God reveal to you, Margie, if you're that person? And no, 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 follow the rules, 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 rules. And God goes, what? Well, I'm going to need you to break some rules for me, Margie. I'm going to need you to do some things that you wouldn't normally otherwise do. I'm going to have to make you uncomfortable right quick, but I'm going to show you my providence in making you uncomfortable. I'm going to order your steps in a way that you wouldn't otherwise have gone, but if you'll follow those steps, I'm about to do something for you. I'm about to have a breakthrough for you. And I think that's what the writer is trying to say there, is take God with you into the dark places. You can create something from there. There's habitable order in that chaos. There's something in that darkness that you really need. You really need it. And if you just go, you'll really find it. You really will. You can stay in the light all day. There's nothing to find there. It's all revealed. It's all open. It's comfortable. It's comfortable. There's no work in it. Or if it's a game, it's not a game where you're getting competitive because it's just laissez-faire, ceasefire, non-confrontational, easy going. And there are times and places for that. But when we're talking about our purpose, when we're talking about our direction, where we go and what we do, it's time to get uncomfortable. It's time to venture out into the unknown, the unfamiliar, the darkness, and do so knowing that God is with you. And if He's with you, you're going to get out of it exactly what you need. And not just for you. That's the beautiful thing. We talked about this some during the week, is every message or every lecture, everything that I've ever taught has been a huge thing for me to learn. And I still deal with those things. And it still teaches me as I study that. But it wasn't just for me. I've spoken to others that it impacted them similarly. We come from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, different career backgrounds, different family dynamics. And yet somehow, this individual and myself, we share this common thread with this teaching that we both are still working on and still mulling over and still dealing with. There's something in it that we need. There's something in that discomfort. There's something in that darkness. There's something in that direction that you need.
Yeah, and that's what Ezekiel realizes. Well, I know we were talking about Proverbs, but Solomon's saying the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. Hope deferred or drawn out or prolonged or delayed makes your heart sick because you have your hope on something. Mm-hmm. You have your hope set on something. All of us have our hope set on something. Maybe we haven't worked it out within our own darkness enough to know what that thing is, but we all have some sort of true north that we're working towards. Or else you wouldn't be working at all, or you wouldn't be getting up, and you wouldn't be doing anything. And I know we're speaking to those types of people too. How do you get in that place? Well, you get there because hope's been deferred. People get broken because they had their hopes set. And a lot of times, most of the time I would even dare to say, people never recover from that. They just build on top of that brokenness another totally different pathway for their life. when really it's in the darkness, it's in the fire, it's in the trial that you see these are the things that are giving me my new focus, my new purpose, the true focus that I should have. But it says when desire comes, it is a tree of life. What is a tree of life? Well, it doesn't take you long in the Bible to figure that out. The first chapter, the first book. The tree of life is what we're all supposed to be partaking in. It's still open. It's still there. It's still for us to find within our own self. It's not about you trying to figure out how we get back to some mythological garden. It's
Right.
about how you take your darkness and you find your tree in the middle of it. Because there have been things that have banished us from the garden within our own heart, within our own mind. We've banished ourselves out of our own garden. And you have to follow your heart, follow Jesus to get back to that tree of life. So, Ezekiel.
And we are the trees of life. The Bible tells us we are the planting of the Lord. And when you look at a tree in its physical representation, just biology, as the trunk goes up, branches begin to spread out. The leaves begin to bloom. Fruit begins to grow. It's this huge, massive top to a tree. But that's only what we see growing out of the soil. If we're to see as God sees, what does God see? There are two sides to this tree. There's one side that lives in the light, and there's another side that lives in complete and total darkness. And the trunk goes down into the earth, and just as it does on the top, it begins to spread out its roots and branch out, and the tree is just as big, if not bigger, underneath that soil than it is on top of that soil. What is that telling us? The tree's life comes from the soil. It comes from the darkness. The tree can never grow so tall unless it's willing to grow so deep. The shallower it chooses to stop growing, the shallower the tree will grow at top. If we're to be the planting of the Lord, if we're to provide the fruit of the tree of life, we're going to have to spread our roots as deep into that darkness, into that soil, to get what we need as much as possible. It's a continuing process. If a tree lives, its root system continues to grow deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Now it can hit stones. It can hit blocks. What does that tree do? It grows around them. It finds a way. It doesn't let a rock exist as an excuse for why it cannot continue to grow and produce and bring forth fruit. These stumbling blocks, these things that come in and out of our ministries, these issues, these problems, we can either use them as an excuse to stop growing, or we can be the planting of the Lord. We can grow around those things, through those things, push past them, and continue to keep providing God's people with the fruit of life. That's our purpose. That's our design.
Another beautiful, this is amazing that we're here because the tallest trees in the world are not the deepest roots.
True.
The tallest trees in the world are the redwood trees.
Yep.
And you know how the redwood trees get so tall? They interlock underneath the soil with each other.
Right.
So the redwood trees are not focused on getting as deep as they possibly can singularly. They are focused on interweaving so much beneath the soil with all the other root systems, with all the other trees, that now you have people driving all the way across America, people getting in airplanes flying all the way around the world to see the redwood forest. So what is it about the redwood forest that makes it so amazing? It's the interlocking and the interweaving of the roots beneath the ground. So when we see that a tree has fallen, what do? There's hope. There's hope because my roots can get to yours.
Right.
My roots can get to yours. So lift up your faith, guys. A lot of us are here today with nothing but a hope that we can be recovered and knitted together in one faith, one Lord, and one baptism. That's what we're here to do. We're not here to do anything else but to assemble ourselves together. And if that needs to be in the darkest parts of your life, let it be in the darkest parts of your life. This will be a shelter for you. This will be a sanctuary. This will be the place you can come where you can find someone that's not afraid to get down in your dirt. Because Jesus wasn't afraid to do that with everybody he encountered. Ezekiel had hopes, high hopes, very high hopes. Ezekiel was going to be a priest in Jerusalem until Babylon sieged Jerusalem. When Babylon laid siege to Jerusalem, Ezekiel was taken as an exile. Ezekiel was exiled away from Jerusalem. So you talk about having your heart sick. This is a man that was going to be a priest, had worked hard to be the priest, was looking to be the priest. And all of a sudden it was dashed. All of a sudden his hope was taken. And here he finds himself in a strange land, away from his calling, away from what he thought was his calling, away from his hope, away from his future. And it says in Ezekiel, turn to Ezekiel 1 if you should be already there. Verse 1. He says, in my 13th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day, when I was among the exiles by the Kebar River, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. You know what the Kebar River is? You know what the Kebar River is? Do you know what Kebar means? Kebar means this. It means long or long time, a very far off, long time or space, extent of time hitherto now. I'm going to read that again for you. Kebar means far off, a long time or space, extent of time hitherto now. So here you have Ezekiel in the land he's not supposed to be in when you ask him, doing something he shouldn't have to be doing, praying with people he shouldn't. These people shouldn't be exiles. These people are supposed to have their life together, right? No, they're exiles. They've been taken out of their homeland. So now you have him right in front of a river that represents what? A very long time. And he's looking and is seeing his reflection in that river. He's seeing himself in that long time. He's 30 years old, but how many have been 30 and felt like you've lived? Man, when you're going through, you feel old, man. It don't matter how old you are. When you're going through something, you feel like, man, I feel like I'm about 76 right now. I'm tired. This is awful. I'm never going to get out of this. I feel like I'm about 87 years old right now. This is how long this has taken. It's taken me forever to get out of this darkness. I feel like I'm 116 right now. Okay, I'm sorry. All right. But he's sitting there at the river that means a very long time, okay? And he hears the voice of God. He's living with the exiles, and he had his plans for what? What were his plans? What were Ezekiel's plans? To be a priest. But God didn't want the priest. God wanted the prophet. I said God didn't want the priest. God wanted the prophet. Ezekiel had his heart set on being the priest, but God needed to raise a prophet. And it wouldn't have been that possible if it wouldn't have been for the exile. It wouldn't have been possible had it not been for the darkness. Thank God that we didn't get Ezekiel the priest. Thank God that we got Ezekiel the prophet. Thank God we didn't get Ezekiel the priest. Thank God we got Ezekiel the prophet. Verse 2, on the 5th of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, by the Kebar River in the land of the Babylonians. There the hand of the Lord was on him. I'm going to read just a few verses to get Josh up to the wheels here. Verse 4, I'm going to jump around. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud flashing with light, and lightning surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Jump down, all 4 of them had faces and wings. Jump down again. Each one went straight ahead. They did not turn as they moved. So Ezekiel's having this wild vision of these cherubim or angels or whatever you want to call it, and they've got these faces, and they're not turning one way or the other. There are 4 east, north, south, west. Each face takes each side. So everywhere they go is linear. There's no turning. What does that remind you of? There's no turning. No shadow. There's no turning in God. No shadow, no darkness. Nothing but light. Well, how is that even possible? How could it be possible that there's no shadow of turning in God? How is it possible? Because He takes the darkness to make the light. Good gracious. Verse 12, each one went straight ahead. Wherever the Spirit would go, they would go, without turning as they went. The appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire, or like torches. Fire moved back and forth, and among the creatures it was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. The creatures spread back and forth like flashes of lightning. And we're going to leave that alone, and we're going to focus specifically on the wheels today. And maybe Pops can help us out with the in-between Wednesday night or something. Verse 15, as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and the structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. I'm going to let you jump right there if you're ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've heard this taught a multitude of ways. The way that I had originally heard it taught was to look at this like a helm, where you have a very small wheel, and then spokes spread out from that wheel outward, and then you have a larger wheel that ties the spokes back in. So you have small wheel, spokes that go out, bigger wheel, just like a car wheel, a wheel of an automobile. And you have this larger wheel that is the humanity that touches the earth, and then the inner wheel, which is the divine being that is driving the driving force around the axle within. And I still think that is a decent way of looking at it. But when I look at this now, when I think about this word picture now and what this is supposed to show, what I really see are 2 circles that are intersecting, one going west to east, so a circle that's going this way, and then a circle that's going north and south, so a circle that's going this way. Now, when they spin those 2 circles, we see what? What's the optical illusion that's created there? It's a sphere, ball. So these rings, these circles, these wheels within wheels, the way they operate, the way the Scripture tells us is they don't have to turn. They can go in any direction at any point in time. As you brought out James 1:17, there's no shadow of turning. It doesn't turn. It's any direction at any point at any time. So what is that? What are these wheels illustrating? Are they living beings? It says that the wheels in the Scripture are near living beings, that the wheels are given spirit from the living beings. The spirits of the cherubims are what's giving movement or motion to the wheels itself. But if we really look at what Ezekiel is seeing here, the undergirding of our existence is something that we talked about in the song that we did in praise and worship. It's heaven meeting earth at a point. It's God, the fullness of the universe, God's direction as one wheel, and intention as another wheel. God's will in one wheel, God's purpose in another wheel. And the thing about these things is they are constantly moving forward. They never turn around. They never go backwards. Since the beginning of creation, God has been moving creation forward into His will and into His purpose. As we all join in, remember who we are, and decide to give our lives to it, as those things begin to fall in place, what we realize is we step into something that's always been happening, always been going on, always been waiting for you. It's been waiting for you to figure it out. It's been waiting for you to remember and come to this place, but it's been moving the whole time. So if it doesn't turn around, if it doesn't stop and doesn't change course, it constantly keeps moving. What does that mean? That means that no matter what happens, whether you're obedient or disobedient, whether you hit the mark or miss the mark, whether you reach transcendence or reduce yourself to a mere existence, God can pivot in any direction to keep things moving forward. That's how God is in control. We talk about His omniscience. We talk about His omnipotence. We talk about His omnipresence. This is what I believe these wheels that Ezekiel sees represents, what it's really showing. And I think there is another connection with another prophet in the Old Testament that I think gives credence to this. When we talk about the wheel within the wheel in Ezekiel 1:16, what do we hear? It's made of beryl stone. You talked about this beryl stone. It can come in a multitude of colors, but the most common colors are the pigments of humanity. The golds, the tans, the browns, the earth tones. Now, we were created in God's image, were we not? And look at our tones. Look at our skin tones. Some could call us a beryl species because of the variation in the earth tones that exist within the colors of our biological makeup. There's no turning. James 1:7, He is the God of lights, the Father of lights, in whom there is no variableness, no shadow of turning. But what does Daniel tell us? Well, Daniel speaks of a certain man in Daniel chapter 10, verse 5. Now, many commentators, when they talk about this passage, refers to what Daniel is speaking to as a theophany, or a pre-incarnate Christ that is being described. Before Jesus exists, Daniel's talking about him. That is an idea. So it reads in verse 5, Then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man, clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body was also like the beryl. Okay, so we've got that connection between these two. And his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire. This was a flaming chariot wheel, according to Ezekiel. All right? And his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude, or more than one. These are wheels within wheels, and there's 4 of them. It's the voice of a multitude. I'm trying to make this connection so that the symbolism behind it makes sense, so that we can kind of get out of the fantasy thinking of Ezekiel 1 into who is he really talking about? What are we really talking about? I believe we're talking about God in the universal concept and conceptualization of a God that has created all things and is moving and progressing all things forward. Later in Ezekiel in chapter 10, just to further this point a little bit more, it refers to the wheels again, and it gives the impression or the inference, the implication that these wheels allowed spirits to immediately go in any direction where they were told to go. So this wheel within a wheel, this God, is what gives the spirit of man the ability to go anywhere, anytime, any place within his will and accomplish all things for God's purpose. It's the driving force, so to speak. It's what gets the ball rolling. It's what puts the movement behind your faith. It's when you step on the gas, this is what starts turning. And you realize, I didn't even have to step on the gas. I just had to get in the car. This was already moving when I got in here. This was already going forward.
That's what Ezekiel realizes.
Right.
He's 30 years old. The significance of him being 30 years old is off the charts. In let's see, I wrote it down here. It is in Numbers 4:3. God tells Moses and Aaron to take a census. They take a census of everybody that's between 30 and 50. Now, the 30-year mark is significant because that's when you were able to be the priest. So Ezekiel knows that I'm 30 now. If I were in Jerusalem, if the ball was still rolling in my life, I would be a priest right now. If the ball was still rolling, if I still had momentum, if things were still going my way, if my hopes had not been dashed, I would still be in Jerusalem. He's looking at that river. He's thinking about his situation. He's thinking about his pain, his trouble, his hopes being dashed. He's thinking about, I should be in the temple. I should be in Jerusalem. And all of a sudden you hear this wild voice, you hear a voice, and it's God's literal manifest presence, not in the temple, coming to him in exile. And as you say, the ball was already rolling. Ezekiel realized this whole time I've been in exile, I've not lost any traction. I've not lost any movement. I've not lost any distance. There's been no distance or delay between me and my Father. There's been no casting away of the promise. Everything has been in motion.
Yeah.
It's been in motion. It's in motion in your life right now. We sing a song called Waymaker. And in that bridge we say, even when I don't see it, He's working. Even when I don't feel it, He's working. How many of you can testify that right now maybe you don't feel it? I don't see it. I don't think it's possible. But here I tell you today, what is impossible with anthropos, what is impossible with man, is possible with God. Ezekiel's plans was to be the priest in Jerusalem. God needed him up by the river Kabar to hear the voice that the ball's already been in motion. The wheels are turning.
And he's been watching it.
Yeah.
He's been watching Ezekiel.
Yeah.
These wheels also have eyes all about them from the top to the bottom, seeing all things. Again, another idea that it ties into God's omniscience, that He is all-seeing. He sees all things. There's not a sparrow that falls to the ground without God taking notice. He knows the number of hairs on your head, whether that number fluctuates from day to day or not. For some of us, it fluctuates more than others. Right? There's this movement that's given to the wheel, and that's God's omnipresence. Because God is omnipresent, there's constant movement going through the universe. Our universe is ever expanding and ever growing because of God's omnipresence. There's this elevated position because at the height of the wheel is at the heights of heaven. At the bottom of the wheel is where it comes down and it touches earth. Yeah. It's omnipotence from the furthest expanses upward to the lowest reaches downward. His eyes are towards you, whether it's heaven where your bed is or it's hell where your bed is. His eyes are towards you. So what does this mean? If we're made in God's image, then we too are the wheels within the wheel. We too, if we truly identify what we are, become the movement that pushes the faith forward, that progresses the kingdom. We are elevated in position to see the lowest of us and then rotate towards them in love, to reach down from an elevated position all the way to the bottom and touch them here and now where they need it. Yes. This is our role, pun intended. It is our role, R-O-L-E, and our role, R-O-L-L.
And His will, W-I-L-L.
We're just going to have fun with it now. Right, I am rolling. The wheels represent providence.
Wyatt, I'm rolling.
Why does it represent providence? Why is God representing providence in this vision? Because providence produces change. It produces change. There is a turning you have to make. You have to turn from your wicked ways. You have to turn from your missed shots. You have to turn from your vices, turn from your prejudices, turn from your biases, turn from your own will. And when you turn and face God. And when you find God and you look into the face of God, you see your own face, and God sees your face. And then there's never a reason to turn again. Now, every direction is open to you because you made the turn that counts. And once you make that turn, in God, there is no more turning. There's no shadow of turning. There's no variableness left. There's only movement. There's only will and purpose of the divine to walk into, to roll into, and play your role for. So it does not despond in adversity, for the wheels are turning around. Do not. We don't despond. Don't get despondent. Don't be downcast. When adversity comes, when troubles come, when things feel like they're not moving, when they're not working, when things aren't going the way we planned, this is not what I signed up for. This is not looking the way I thought it was going to look. This is not acting the way I thought it was going to act. It's not making me feel the way I want it to feel. Don't become despondent. Why? because the wheels are turning round and will raise us in due time. Just because you're down at the bottom of the revolution, if you have the faith of God to understand that God is the wheel within the wheel and that you too are the wheel within the wheel, then you might be at a bottommost place now. But if you'll just hold on, if you'll just have faith, and you'll just know that He sees you down there at the bottom, there's going to come another revolution.
Yeah.
There's going to come another turn.
Yeah.
There's going to come another course of direction where you're at the bottommost place now, but you're at the uppermost place here.
My goodness. And think about that, man, because if you would for a minute, and I'm just now seeing this, so give me some grace. As you're a child, when you experience your first heartbreak, let's say you're a kid and you got high hopes and you're doing this little circle. You're going up, right? But then when you get your first heartbreak, it's like, okay, I'm going down. But I'm coming back up. I feel better now. Mommy put a Band-Aid on my boo-boo. Now I'm feeling better. Okay, and you get a little bit older and you go to school, and I've got these plans, but all of a sudden you're not what you thought you were, and the circle gets a little bit bigger. You get a little bit bigger. The downfall gets a little bit bigger. Then by the time you're a teenager, you got a pretty good circle, right? You got your circle of friends. You're growing. You're doing things that you're on the right trajectory, and your life is really, really starting to make that incline up. But when you're a teenager, you realize, oh man, I've got all these different type things going on in my life, in my head, in my heart, in my body, if you will. I mean, and then all of a sudden the downfall starts to feel even more and even greater. That's why teens need this message of oneness in Jesus. We need to be that light for them, because the downturn feels bigger. And then by the time you get to be an adult, oh man, you got it figured out, right? You got it figured out. Because you're way up here, right? You've learned everything. You went to school, you graduated, got the job you needed, everything's going right. Then a heartbreak comes, then your life falls apart, and all of a sudden the revolution downward is a lot longer and a lot deeper and a lot harder. But what has life taught you in all this? That it's a cycle.
Right.
And you've got the biggest circle that you could ever have, a circle big enough to incorporate other circles.
The cosmogonic cycle.
Come on.
Joseph Campbell would describe it.
Say it again.
The cosmogonic cycle. That's how Joseph Campbell would describe it. It's the universal and the cosmic impact that God has on the world. It's the hero with 1,000 faces. We talked about the many-faced God last Sunday. The hero with 1,000 faces is what? It's all of us. It's God and you. God's face looks like Jeff Walker. Weird. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I love him. I can joke with him like that. He's not easily offended. I appreciate that about it. But it's your face.
Yeah.
And your children.
Yeah.
We can't do it without any one of you. Like the redwoods that you're bringing up.
Come on.
That connectivity doesn't take away from your individuality. Every redwood tree is different from the next. The one standing next to it, it's unique. Its branches grow in different places. Its bark is shaped differently. You can tell they're all redwoods, but there's something a little bit different about each and every one, because in their growing together, they learned how to grow taller. They learned how to get closer to heaven in their connectivity without losing their individuality. They didn't become a collective. They grew together as individuals.
That's what's beautiful.
That's what's beautiful about the Grove. That's why people travel the world to see it, because you would think they would all start to look the same, because that's what human beings do. We see these neighborhoods and these suburbs go up, and every single house is identical. They all look exactly the same. Everybody's got the same thing. There's no individuality left. The era of building homes where everyone was somewhat different and somewhat unique, there was artistry attached to it that was more in line with what our Creator does. That was in line with what creation does in the redwood tree. It's, I'm going to be this redwood tree and I'm going to be this redwood tree. But if we just link together in our individuality, we'll both grow tall. We'll both get somewhere. And I'm here to tell each and every one of you, if you'll link together with all of us, we'll all get somewhere. We'll all grow taller. We'll all grow further. We'll all progress forward for the kingdom. That's the idea. That's why we talk about these phrases like being fitly framed together or woven together as God's tapestry. When you're woven together in a tapestry, your string doesn't lose its color or texture. It's connected with another string, another thread with its own color and texture. They both maintain their beauty and they blend together to form a photo, but they never lose their individual frequency. They never lose their individual attribute or characteristic. It remains. just like we know it remains. We've all accepted the salvation of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, yet we all serve Him in different ways and capacities. We all speak about the Scriptures in different ways. We all see things slightly differently. That's why we come together, because when we come together, we can put all of these ideas together, and all of these ideas together help forward the kingdom that's already moving forward. Why would we not grow along with it? It's already going somewhere. Why not get in the car and see where we're going? Let's stop standing or resting on our laurels. Let's stop letting rocks get in the way of our root system and grow beyond them. These petty inconsistencies and these inconveniences, these issues. Morality is where we have to get back to from a church perspective. What is moral for not just you to do at home or when no one's looking, but what is moral for our people to learn, to operate in, to live in? How do we have these conversations in the modern world, in the modern era with modern problems? How do we establish what is moral conduct and what is not moral conduct? What's good conduct and what's bad conduct? What is truly causing someone to miss the mark and what needs to be let go? Because some things truly aren't having an impact that you think it would, because it would impact you differently. Now, if you were doing it, that might be a problem. That level of differentiation between each other is something the church is not good at parsing out. It's too difficult. It's like Carl Jung said, thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge.
Wow.
If I have to think about how this would impact my life and how it impacts your life, well, that's difficult to do. I just know it'd be bad for me, so I'm going to make the judgment. It's bad for you too. Mm-hmm. That's easier. But that's not what the wheel within the wheel of God is showing us. Mm-hmm. Is that those types of conceptualizations cause problems. Those are turns. You're turning someone some type of way. And they're not designed to be turned or twisted or manipulated. They're designed to be exactly what they are. And exactly as they are, they can move in any direction without being turned or twisted or manipulated. It's the same concept. If God is providence, the wheel within the wheel represents God in His universal concept as providence, as the way, the truth, and the life. Then it's the same understanding that Carl Nietzsche had about someone's spirit. The measure of a person's spirit is measured by what? How much truth they're willing to tolerate without turning it, without twisting it, without diluting it, without watering it down, without sweetening it. So this truth idea and this religion idea, they're connected in this way. In that I don't need to create new laws that turn someone to what I think is right. No, that person has a trajectory all of their own. And that direction can follow whatever direction the master has. You don't need to turn it around. You don't need to twist it. You don't need to take it this way or just adjust it just a little bit. Get your hands off of that. What you're trying to get people to is to understand that they are the wheel within the wheel. And then they'll follow the will of God. They'll surrender their will. And it will be over time. It's going to take effort. It's going to take study. It's going to take love to get there. Because if we don't do it that way, then all we're doing is setting up a new set of rules, our own faux morality, our own faux structure. We establish our own order out of our own undealt with, unidentified, and unresolved chaos, which is going to, once again, muddy the waters, and we're going to have more that are lost than are found. More that are going nowhere while everything is continuing to move forward. Mm-hmm. We think about the passage of time, and a lot of times we say this as we get older. It's like, God, my 20s just flew by. No, they didn't. It took the same amount of time every single year of your life to pass. It didn't change. It wasn't faster at any moment. The world didn't turn more quickly. It's been the exact same for the last 20 years. 20 years ago, the day was still 24 hours in a single day. There was still 365 days in that year, and it took all 365 days and all 24 hours of each of those 365 days to get through that. But what we do understand as we get older is that time is the most precious currency that we have. Imagine it like this. You get a big check. You put $20,000 in the bank. You got it in your savings account. 5 years goes by. You go back to the bank, and your checking account's down to, or your savings account's down to $1,500. You're going to feel like it was just yesterday you had $20,000 in that bank account. Because you're missing currency. You know what you could do with that money. And as time continues to go on, you know what you could do with more and more time. So it becomes more precious to you. What we're trying to get you to understand here is what Ezekiel is seeing is how precious you really are to this timeline.
And he's sitting by the river of time.
And he's sitting by, exactly. He's sitting by the river of time, trying to get you to see how important the time you spend is.
Man.
How long it takes you to come to the realization that you are the driving force behind your faith. You are the driving force behind the will of God. The wheel that touches the earth is you. You're here. Ty's here to make a difference. Scott's here to make a difference. Margie's here to push the message forward that much further. The bishop's here for this purpose. We are here for this purpose. It's the providence of God that we're guided by Ezekiel to see what God is, to remember what we are. By the river of time, the passage of time, he sees that God is a wheel that's constantly moving. And the way that I had it written down last night when we talked about this, I want to make sure I say it correctly, is the direction is God's will, the intention is God's purpose. So these two wheels, it's will and purpose. Much like yourself, you're dealing with your own will and the things that you purpose yourselves to do. Well, you're already acting as though you've been created in the image of God when you're succumbing to your own will and your own purpose. Because it's the will and purpose of a God that lives within you. And whether you're a good God or a bad God is entirely up to you. Whether you live a shadowy existence in your darkness as it overtakes you and moves you in any direction it wills, or you integrate your darkness. You individuate yourself from the collective insanity and the calamity that follows. And you become something that is guided, directed, given purpose and will by the originator, the original creator, God himself, as he is the will within the wheel, instructing and guiding us how to be the will within the wheel and move in the direction he wills us to go. And that direction is limitless. It doesn't have to be one certain way. It doesn't have to be through this seminary track or that seminary track or this many messages or that many messages, this many ministries or that many ministries, this many years or that many years. It's right here. It's right now. God is the first cause to the universe. We are every cause since being made in his image. God is the first cause, and we are every cause since then. We are. And we don't act like it. We still scoff at this idea that God is still somehow going to come here and do something that is beyond what we can do. He used Jesus for a reason. Jesus used Judas for a reason. Jesus had disciples for a reason. Jesus visits Paul for a reason. God is not going to come down in his omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience and start doing things here. If you're looking for how heaven touches earth, how this wheel that extends into heaven and comes down and touches the earth and moves the earth forward for God works, it's you, it's me, it's us. We are the wheels. In the four faces of God that sees in all four directions, there's one of our faces that can see in one direction and another face for another and another face for another. We have all of our angles covered if we have all of you. If we have all of you. That's what we need. We need all of you. We don't need more separation and division. We don't need more rules to follow that makes it harder for us to follow God. This is something that Jesus in the Gnostic Gospels was constantly saying. Do not create more rules for these people than I have told you. Do not do that. Do not complicate this. Stop trying to turn people into something else. If they turn from their wickedness, that's the only turn that they make. And then every direction is open. Correct. Every direction is open. They don't need to make another turn. It's not how it works. But it's how people do things. And it's what we see that's happened. It's God's creation is purposive. Psalm 19:21 or 19:20 and 21, I think this is what ties into what Ezekiel gets into later on in the book. Hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou mayest be wise in thy latter end. Or at the bottommost point of the revolution, when you feel like you're at the very bottom of things, things haven't worked out or gone the way that they've gone. Hear the counsel, receive the instruction, that you may be wise in that moment, because there's an upturn coming. You're going to rise from that position again. It's going to be a cycle. It's a cosmogonic cycle. It's going to constantly keep rotating and keep revolving in this way. Verse 21 reads, and this is from the ESV version, many are the plans of the mind of man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. The providence of God is firm. It's sure. The wheel within the wheel keeps moving regardless of what you do. And if God has to change direction because you refuse to be obedient, God can and God will.
But the invitation's always there.
But would God choose to do that? No.
Right.
God would have you obey. He would have you submit. Drink from the cup of your sacrifice. Be obedient, because the obedience becomes the sacrifice. Endure. What is it, Matthew 5:11? You will be prosecuted. You'll be persecuted. You'll be reviled. But God is your reward. There's reward in this. We are His portion that touches the earth. We are His wheels of motion. We're what moves the kingdom forward. If only we would be. If only we would see ourselves as that significant and that important. That we move the kingdom. That God designed us to move the kingdom. We are God's touch of heaven here on this earth that He called heaven.
I think that's the thing, though, is you have to differentiate what's you and what's Him. Because the wheels, there is no separation. You are the wheel within the wheel within the wheel, and He's the wheel within the wheel within the wheel, and we're the wheels within the wheels. We're all connected. But there is a definite distinction between your plans and His plans.
Yeah.
There is an eternal distinction. And you have to make that realization.
Well, here's the ocean of grace, though. Ephesians 1:11.
Okay.
He's going to work all things according to His will. All things. Good and bad.
Right.
All things are going to get worked.
Right.
Genesis 50:30.
Right.
You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. And everyone was kept alive as a result. Look at all the people that were saved. Right. The thing that you meant for bad, your will, God can still use it. Absolutely. That is the providence of God. It's still going to move forward. Right. You might mean to be disobedient. You might mean to disobey. You might mean to be sinful. You might mean to engage in wickedness. But God can use all of that to continually move forward and turn it into good. That's the ocean of grace we're all sinking in. Because regardless of what we do, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect others. But God's plan, His will, and His purpose are steady, consistent, and sure, and they will move forward. And it will be for good, for the good of the many that will see it be good.
I'm going to read this general dance. I got to read it. What is serious, this is by Thomas Merton. What is serious to men is often very trivial in the sight of God. Get that? What is serious to men, football, no, I'm just kidding. Whatever.
It's back.
Yeah. What is serious to men is often very trivial in the sight of God. What in God might appear as play is perhaps what He Himself takes most seriously. At any rate, the Lord plays and diverts Himself in the garden of His creation. And if we could let go of our own obsession with what we think is the meaning of it all, we might be able to hear His call and follow him in his mysterious cosmic dance. The wheel within the wheel, if you will. We do not have to go very far to catch echoes of that game and of that dancing when we are alone on a starlit night, when by chance we might see the migrating birds in autumn descending upon a grove of junipers, when we see children in a moment like we did Wyatt a moment ago, when they're really children, when we love in our own hearts, or when, like the Japanese poet Basho, we hear an old frog land in a quiet pond with a solitary splash. At such times, the awakening, the turning inside to the turning inside out of all values, no pun intended, the newness, the emptiness, and the purity of vision that makes themselves evident provides a glimpse of the cosmic dance. For the world and time are the dance of the Lord in emptiness. The silence of the spheres is the music of a wedding feast. The more we persist in misunderstanding the phenomena of life, the more we analyze them out. Get this, the more we analyze them out into strange finalities and complex purposes of our own. The more we involve ourselves in sadness, absurdity, and despair. But it does not matter much, because no despair of ours can alter the reality of things or stain the joy of the cosmic dance, which is always there. Romans 8:28. Indeed, we are in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of us. There it is. Wheel within the wheel, for it beats in our very blood, whether we want it to or not. Yet the fact remains that we are invited to forget ourselves on purpose, cast away our awful solemnity to the winds, and join in the general dance.
I just want to speak to this too. I know we've been a little all over the place. We talk about Ezekiel. This is not necessarily the most entertaining subject matter. It gets pretty dense pretty quick. But he referenced hope deferred. And we just talked about Psalm 19, 20, and 21, the counsel to be wise in your bottommost point. That's why you receive that instruction and counsel. But if I can tie these two thoughts together of what we should hope for and why our hope should not be deferred, I'll take us to Psalm 33. Beginning in verse 11. And it reads like this: The counsel of the Lord standeth forever, the thoughts of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he hath chosen for his own inheritance. We sang the song, we are his portion. The word inheritance comes from the word nakalah, which means portion, patrimony, heritage, possession. His wheels. The Lord looked from heaven. He beholdeth all the sons of men. He beholdeth all his creation, all his people. From the place of his habitation he looked upon all the inhabitants of the earth. He fashioned their hearts alike. He considereth all their works. There is no king saved by the multitude of a host. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. A horse is a vain thing for safety, neither shall he deliver by his great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord, these eyes that are constantly upon us, from the highest heights to the lowest depths, in every way we go and in every way we are. The eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine. You meant things for my evil, but God turned them for good. And look at how many were saved alive. Our soul waiteth for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. He's our providence. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name. Let thy mercy, O Lord, be upon us, according as we hope in thee. If our hope is in the Lord, to continue moving, to continue having a plan and a way and an ability to take what the enemy intends for our evil and our harm and use it for our good. And that's the only turning that our Lord is interested in, us turning from our wickedness and turning wickedness into good. Then I hope we can begin to fashion ourselves like this wheel, that we can continually move forward in our belief, move forward in our faith, move forward in our hope in God's mercy and his abundant grace, that we begin to see more, that our eyes begin to multiply. As they're made single, I know there's some back and forth here, but they begin to multiply in the context of being able to see from the highest of heights and the lowest of depths. Every single individual, every single person that needs to be seen, that needs to move again, that needs to feel purpose, that needs to feel the will of God in their life. So many people don't identify with any of those feelings. We talk about it in church all the time about being called or being chosen. And there are Sunday after Sunday, I can remember these conversations being had, and it's just a few that are being talked to. It's not everyone. And how many people left that day thinking that someone was called and thinking that they didn't have a calling all their own just because they didn't get called out or named by the minister that was teaching that day. There aren't just certain wheels and then you're just another part of the car. We're all wheels. We're all moving. We all have purpose. We all have a will that we have to submit to in God to go somewhere and to do something with it. We all have the ability to see from the highest of heights of the heart and mind of God and the depths of depravity that our humanity can take us to. And this should restore our ability to show mercy again. To know, like Matthew 5 says, to be poor in spirit is to understand I'm just as capable of the atrocities that I'm currently sitting here being tempted to judge another for. I would never do a thing like that. Be careful. Be careful. My mom always said never say never. I didn't know how true that statement was until I said never a couple of times. Oops. And now it's me. And now it is my battle. Oh, I should have had mercy. I should have had grace. I should have understood that that person was dealing with something that I would never understand unless I decided to become their judge. And if I decided to do that, then it was going to be something I came to know very well, more intimately than I ever wanted to. Because as this wheel progresses in each one of our lives, there are moments where we're up here on riding a high. Life is good. Things are working out. We don't have any issues. I don't even think anybody complained this week. Then we're going to have moments where we feel like we're absolutely living in hell. It's the wisdom of Psalm 19 to receive counsel, to know that you don't have to turn into something else when you're down there at the bottom. You're exactly what you need to be. What do you need to find? What do you need to see while you're down there? These eyes that are moving at the top of the bottom. What do I need to see when things are going well? Same thing is true at the bottom. What do I need to see when I'm down here? Maybe it's not you. Maybe it's that others are down here and need to be free. Maybe others are stuck.
That's what Ezekiel did.
They're not moving, right? Their wheel's not moving. They've gotten to the bottom and they've gotten stagnant. They need to get moving again, because in moving again, they'll rise back to the top. Now it'll be a cycle. It's going to be rise and run, rise and run, rise and run, rise and fall. But it's how many times we continue to rise. That's what they always teach. It's not how many times you get knocked down that matters. It's how many times you get back up. You get knocked down 10 times, you come back up 11. That is what we're talking about here. You're going to be persecuted. You're going to be reviled. People are going to think less of you because of who you serve, because of how you are, because of what you identify with. You identify with God? Well, they scoffed at Jesus for that too. You think you're God? Well, you're going to bring on the judgment of all those people who have yet to come to believe. And it's going to feel a lot of times that you're stuck down here at the bottom, but know that you're moving. Know that you're moving. Your light is getting brighter. You're not turning into something else. You're being more and more of what you've always been. You're not becoming anything. You're being. You're just being. This is what obedience looks like. Be yourself. Be what you are. A driving force for the kingdom. God's touch of heaven on this earth. For all of us. And all of us are called to that. All of us were designed that same way. All of us were given that same gift. And how we roll and where we roll and what shade of barrel we are, all of those things are variable. All of those things are different. But the will and the purpose, all of those things will be in line, will be in tune. And like the redwood trees, there will form a network of God that would allow your individuality to grow beyond the heights of any other tree in this garden.
If I could give anybody any word of hope, you may feel like, hey, when you talked about all the bad parts, that's me. When you talked about all the, I don't feel like I'm moving, I don't feel like I'm going anywhere, this is my word of hope to you. Even if you're laying in your bed, asleep, afraid to get up, within your body, electrons are swirling around the nucleus and are moving so fast that they create a sphere. That's what gives that solid state, but it's constantly in motion and bouncing off of each other. The atom is the literal base of all matter. You may be in your own, Michael Hawkins helped us with that, our dear brother. He sent that during the middle of this. So you may be laying in your bed, not even wanting to get up right now. Inside of you, there's a wheel within the wheel, within the wheel, within the wheel. It's literally what you're made of. It's literally the atoms that make your solid state. So take that movement. When you don't even feel it, He's working. When you don't even see it, He's working. Take that movement. Take one foot in front of the other. Get yourself up out of the hell that you're laying in and find somebody to interlink your roots with. Interlink in the forest of the redwood forest. Be the tall tree by finding the brother that found you in your darkness, found you in your soil, and put his roots or her roots around your roots. And then before you know it, the whole world marvels at one forest because they didn't try to grow alone. They relied on each other. Ezekiel is the reason that Israel is still a thing. 100 years. 100 years of sorrow, you had one voice for them. That's Ezekiel. And it's because his plans didn't work out, but God's plans did. God didn't want the priest. God wanted the prophet. And it was those prophets' words that brought the people as a remnant back into Jerusalem. It was those words. Ezekiel would go on to tell you about all the way the temple's going to look, about how all these wonderful things that are going to happen. The book of Ezekiel's wild, so just keep reading it. But as we talked about trees, I think it would be wrong of me not to say this. There's, at the end of Ezekiel, or chapter 41, he talks about significance on the walls of the new temple. We talked about trees. Over a year ago, there was a daughter of this house that prophesied something over this body. And if we believe what we say we believe about the childlike, her words really carry more weight than anything I can say. She said this in reference to a song that we sing, Graves into Gardens. How many of you remember that song? You turn graves into gardens. You're the only one who can. Hadley Grigg wrote this about that song. No, he is not the only one who can. We can also plant the seed and the tree grows into a garden. We cannot turn ashes, but we can see beauty in the ashes. No, he is not the only one who can do it. You can plant the seed in the ground and love it. It will grow into a healthy palm tree, and nothing will knock over the palm tree. We can't turn ashes back into beauty, but we can see the beauty in the ashes. And do you want to know what's on the walls of the new temple in Ezekiel? Palm trees and angels. All over the walls of the new temple. I know that's a little more mystical than what we're used to, but I'm all for the mystical stuff. We had, this whole stage was full of palm trees last week. When I put them in the building back here Wednesday night, I took those palm trees off the stage. I was going to throw them away. Michael told me we needed to keep them. As I'm putting those palm trees in that building back there, I felt the Spirit of God tell me that these trees don't belong in this building. There's something about these trees. So find your own palm tree. Find the will to go on. Find the bend but don't break. Don't give up. He is jealous for me. He loves like a hurricane, and what? I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his winds. and mercy, when all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory. And I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And as Pops just said, it's the weight of the wind, it's the force of the wind that makes that palm tree strong. And it stands up strong. So I'm asking you today, you may have no will to go on. Can you look within yourself and find the will within the will within the will? If you can't, have the courage to pick up the phone and call someone and tell them that you can't. Call someone who is confident enough to reach down into your darkness and become the root system that you need. We're not alone, guys. We're not alone. Something was prophesied over me when I first came to this church a long time ago. I was sitting right over there. And I was broken because we had came from a ministry that just didn't work out for us. And Brent Grigg got up from those drums back there. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Your story's not over." He said, "Your story's not over." He said, "You're not just going to sing. You're not just going to minister in between songs. You're going to preach sermons." And I didn't think I was capable of doing anything like that. But somebody believed in me. And I believe in each one of you. We believe in you. So be that for each other. Be that for the people. Be that for your brothers, your sisters. So say it with me. I love him.
I love him.
Because he first
Because he first
loved me.
loved me.